Hello, everyone. So, this is going to be a short live stream. One, because I'm holding the baby. Two, because I'm not feeling well. I'm definitely under the weather today. And three, because we've got Virgin Galactic news. I don't know about you, but I'm like watching news of the updates of the flight, the mission that they just released. And as of 2 minutes ago, they confirmed a drop test was successful. And I'm always a bit nervous when there's humans flying in space through a company like that. So just I don't know about you, but I'm kind of glued to like the Virgin news at the moment. But it's 1 o'clock Friday on my timeline, so I'm here. I'm here even though I want to be lying down in bed. And I want to talk to you about some of these amazing partnerships in space. And hopefully the baby will cooperate so that I can get this done. But I want to take you back in time. So my first full-time job after college was working for the International Space Station National Laboratory, what was then known as CASIS, Center for the Advancement of Science in Space. So now it's known as ISS National Lab. And there was, I think it was like the second project I was put on. Oh, it was very, very early on when I started working at CASIS that had to do with material science. So backing up, my role was as a scientist, a physical scientist, to evaluate all the proposals that came in through solicitations or unsolicited proposals, as well as evaluate anything that had been, we would go out to some companies and propose projects, we being CASIS, of course. And the idea was that we wanted to fly things to the International Space Station that had scientific merit. And so when I joined CASIS, I was the first physical scientist that they hired. All the other people on the science team were biologists and life sciences. And so they obviously gave me this material science project called, did it have a name? I'm trying to find now where it is in my notes here. So it was a Cobra Golf. It didn't have a name, but at the time, CASIS was playing with this idea of space is in it logo, space is in it stamp of approval, where certain brands would have this seal that said space is in it, and then they would do some kind of partnership with that ISS. And Cobra Puma was the first one. If you don't know what that is, I didn't either, but it's a golf company. And so the idea was they were flying material science in space on the space station to improve the materials of golf clubs. And I didn't do a full scientific merit evaluation of that proposal because at that time that I joined, it was already almost completed. It was essentially a done deal. A done deal. But there was criticism after it was announced. So this was back in June 2012. And there was some pushback because there was concern that the ISS was being used for frivolous projects. And I remember thinking, but it actually is a material science project. They actually are legitimately doing science in space with this project. However, there was concern that the more that we go seek out these kinds of projects with companies that are not space related, commercial projects, product placements, that kind of thing, that it would cheapen the mission of the ISS or take up some valuable resources in terms of space on the ISS, space being, physical space and also mass, electricity, astronaut time was a big one. I don't think this particular project involved astronaut time, but some of the other ones did. There's a certain allocation that CASIS got to fly payloads to the ISS, a very large allocation. I don't remember if it was 50%, but it's something around 50%. And at that time, CASIS was like fairly new. I think it was a year and a half old when I joined, and it was a mess. still struggling, but at the time it was a bit of a mess, and they were still trying to figure out what their mission truly was, and so they were really struggling to fill their allocation with payloads. And the idea with this project, again, formulated mostly before I even started, was that it was a way for increased visibility of research in space, increased visibility of the International Space Station, and reaching outside the general space circles. So if you're watching this, you may or may not be in a space profession. You may or may not be attending space conferences, going to space meetings, seeing that the same people go to these meetings. You will see the same speakers. You will see the same people in attendance. It's a fairly small community. It is growing. It is growing significantly, but it's still pretty small, where a lot of people know the same people. And the idea behind a lot of these projects is that we need to reach beyond our typical audience. We need to explain why doing material science on golf clubs is important to space, or I should phrase that a different way. Why doing material science in space on golf clubs is important to life on Earth, because that is the mission of the employer I worked for, Cases. And it's also largely a mission of NASA as a whole, is using space to improve life on Earth. And so if you're just talking to the space community, we get it, right? We know that. I'm preaching to the choir, right? But if you are talking to the average person, you talk to a family member of yours or a friend of yours who just is not in space at all, they will probably see some negativity in the money being spent or the resources being spent or the energy. Why are we spending money on here when we've got so many problems on Earth, et cetera, et cetera. And so we need to showcase ways in which space benefits life on Earth. Not to mention that there actually is legitimate science being done on space station with these non-space partners. And so the two that I pointed out in the thumbnail of this talk here are two recent ones. The first one I want to talk about is one that just came out a few days ago, Space Perspective, which is arguably not really a space company, but they'll call themselves a space company. They'll call themselves a space tourism company. They put out a partnership with Oreo cookies, where they've got special Oreo cookies, special design, special colors. It is quite pretty, actually. And they have this partnership where there's a sweepstakes to fly some fantastic, winner to a initial flight on the Neptune, not capsule. What is gondola? That is the term for a space balloon. The capsule that's hanging from a space balloon. Because Space Perspective is going up to, I think it's 100,000 feet or 30 kilometers. I don't know why we use feet in America. We really shouldn't. But approximately 30 kilometers, right? And so that's not space according to the definition of international definitions or the U.S. But their argument is it's above most of the atmosphere. You can see the curvature of the Earth and the darkness of the space. And so therefore it's a space tourism flight. And so Oreo just blasted out this galaxy. What did they call it? I have the picture, and of course my notes are all over the place because I'm not organized today. I was lying down before this talk. I'm so not in a good place right now, but you guys bear with me. I apologize for it. Okay, where are my notes? Seriously. Oreo Space Dunk Cookies. So it's a sweepstakes to embark on a 6-hour journey to the edge of space. And they have a quote here from the Space Perspective CEO, Jane Pointer. She says, "Together, we have put innovation, accessibility, playfulness, and spirit of exploration at the heart of this partnership." And I want to point out the terms that they're using here: innovation, accessibility, playfulness, and spirit of exploration. So I think what they're trying to do with this partnership, and I haven't talked to Jane, so I haven't talked to anybody at Oreo, but my impression is that they are really trying to appeal to a large audience. And if you look on social media, they're not necessarily talking about the space aspect. They're talking about the colors. The colors are apparently bisexual colors. I think that was accidental, but tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe it's purposeful. But they're really trying to appeal to an audience that is not their common audience, right? It's the playfulness, the innovation. Well, innovation is space, but I think that a lot of people outside of the space community overlook the innovation of space, where we do have an opportunity to go up in a balloon, very different from what we think of when we think of space travel. It's not that high G rocket flight that whatever Virgin Galactic passengers just experienced just now, which I haven't checked in the past 10 minutes. So I'm like super curious to make sure that they landed okay. I used to get okay. Crew is on the ground. Whew. I get so nervous. I really do. I get so nervous. But you already watching this not live. You already know. But the crew's on the ground safely. They call them crew. They're actually passengers. I guess there's the pilots, but it was for paying passengers. There's nobody on crew as far as I know with that mission other than the pilots. But in any case, back on topic, people don't really think about the innovation of the fact that we can go to space differently and that we are going to go to space differently. It's not the traditional rockets that you think of necessarily. That's the majority of it, but now there's more ways that we can access the view of Earth from above, in this case being a balloon that goes up to 30 kilometers. Spirit of exploration and playfulness. I think sometimes we lose that And we don't mean to. We're just in the grind of our work, and we have to realize that what's more playful than a cookie, right? Like, there's just something fun about that. It's just so frivolous. Nobody needs a cookie to survive, but I love Oreos, and I buy Oreos for my family. It's just one of those things that it's joyful, and it reaches a very wide market. So when you're thinking about reaching outside the space community, partnering with Oreo is a fantastic way to do so. I know that there was that competition. Well, I'm trying to think now. Was it in early 2020? It must have been, or was 2019? I don't remember. Anyway, the I'm thinking of the inspiration for competition. No, that's not the right word. The competition was the different one. The sweepstakes, where they put out an ad on the Super Bowl. So it must have been early in the year, one of those years prior to the flight, which I just can't remember which Super Bowl that was. I apologize. Someone can tell me. I remember seeing the commercial though, and the winner of the sweepstakes, I'm sorry, the winner of the sweepstakes, the contest, was not actually Chris. He was gifted that, but the winner was Chris's friend, and he saw that Super Bowl ad. So that's how you reach a broader audience, right? It's not just the space community who's thinking, oh my gosh, SpaceX is awesome. Let me go follow everything SpaceX is doing, including this private mission called Inspiration 4, and I'm going to sign up. That's what I did, right? That's how I found out. Maybe it's how you found out. But I was, attuned to space news, and I found out there was this Inspiration 4 mission, and I found out I could enter a contest, and I entered. But the majority of people on planet Earth did not find out that way. A large part they found out through things like partnering with the Super Bowl, an advertisement. There's other examples of that. Another one in that thumbnail is one that's not necessarily new, but popped up again recently, which is a BuildABear partnership with Axiom Space. So BuildABear is a toy company. You might see their stores in the malls. I don't go to malls much anymore, but you might still see them out there. And it's adorable, right? So one thing that's gotten very popular is the indicators being a toy. I don't know who popularized this, but it's been around for a few years now, where it's some kind of, stuffed animal, plush animal, some kind of toy that symbolizes we are in space, because it's not tethered down by Velcro or a tie. It is tethered in the sense that there's a string, but it's floating around to indicate that we are in space now. And so the zero-G indicator for Axiom 2 and Axiom 3 mission was this little Build-A-Bear called Gigi, and it's so cute. And the spacesuit that Gigi is wearing is Axiom's spacesuit, a version of Axiom's spacesuit for a teddy bear, to highlight that not only is Axiom flying private astronauts to space with SpaceX, but also Axiom is building spacesuits on behalf of NASA. And so I just love that tie-in, because it ties in so many aspects of what Axiom is actually doing in space with the playfulness of a toy and the real life demonstration of microgravity situation, where this teddy bear is flying in space, in the capsule, in the Dragon capsule. And I think those partnerships are fantastic. But not everyone agrees with me, because I want to point out a controversy. So back when ISS was starting to do a lot more of these commercialization, in fact, it was mostly NASA driven. NASA's kind of slow on this, by the way. It was the Russians who did this first. But back in like the 2020s, I want to say, like early 2020-ish, 2019-ish, there was a lot more push for commercialization of ISS, because there was this understanding that we were putting a lot of money into the Artemis program, and we needed to find ways to lessen the burden of ISS or make it more profitable, or in some way demonstrate that you could commercialize the space station. And so NASA put out these different fees as to how much it wanted to be reimbursed if you did this versus that. It also was the beginning of Axiom 1 was early 2022. So Axiom 1 was delayed, but Axiom obviously was already planning to fly private missions with SpaceX to the ISS in that time period, but it flew a little later. But so the thing was that ISS was not built to be a commercialized platform. It was not built to be a space tourism facility. It did, it's not new that it is, 2020. I'm sorry, not 2020, 2000. Dennis Tito flew in 2000. So he was the first space tourist, and he flew to the ISS. So that was the Russian side, in partnership with Space Adventures. And Space Adventures also flew a lot of other private astronauts to the International Space Station, space tourists. So space tourism and those kinds of private missions were not new to the ISS, but they were new to NASA, because previously it had really been Roscosmos, the Russians, that were handling that. Now we see in this change of administration, it was really with Jim Bridenstine coming on as NASA administrator, we see that there's this push for commercialization. And so there was an increased awareness of what was going on. And there was a selection of Estee Lauder, which is a cosmetics company, by my former employer, ISS National Lab, to fly to space. And it was a plastics research demonstration. You know, there was actual real research, real science being done, just like that Cobra Puma demonstration that I told you about, the material science demonstration. But there was also a photo shoot. And there was a congressional hearing, a Senate hearing, in which a senator made this comment and asked Jim Bridenstine, I guess I'm having trouble understanding how Estee Lauder's effort is going to support the commercialization efforts of NASA, because as I understand it, they're expected to reimburse NASA about $128,000, which is a fraction of what the project will cost. Can you talk about how shooting the cosmetics commercial advances NASA's mission? And that was Senator Jean Shaheen. And she was from New Hampshire, if anyone remembers. And Jim Bridenstine did not expect this question, so he did not have a real answer prepared. In fact, he sort of agreed that shooting a commercial in space wasn't the mission of NASA, but it sort of overlooked the reason why Estee Lauder was flying with ISS National Lab was to do that research, right? So there's multiple things going on here. There's the concept of doing private research in space. And just yesterday, I haven't really dug into the research of this yet, but just yesterday, SpaceX put out a call for private research to be done in their own missions. I think that's more on the medical side or the biology side. But there is a real need, I think, for expanding the commerce of space outside of the typical space circles. There's also a greater understanding that the more we spread the message of space outside traditional space circles with these non-space companies, the more that we're going to capture people's imagination, whether it be children with a BuildABear, or whether it be, just women with a cosmetics brand, whatever it happens to be, golf players with Cobra Puma golf, whatever it happens to be, we're reaching outside traditional space circles and talking to a broader audience. And that is also vital to the mission of, so many of us. And I think to NASA. And I also want to point out that in that announcement for the BuildABear, there was a quote. Let me read it. It was Sandra Nelson, the vice president of marketing. And she said that the partnership for Axiom Space and BuildABear encourage children of all ages to learn about space exploration and our efforts to expand access to microgravity for individuals, countries, and institutions to conduct meaningful scientific research. So that was in the press release for the BuildABear partnership. And notice that it was a vice president of marketing who made that comment, and that it's talking not necessarily about the BuildABear effort only, but it's talking about encouraging children, which is bipartisan, widely supported effort. When you talk about promoting science, you're talking about promoting science to children a lot of the time in the minds of Congress, members of Congress. But also it's talking about expanding access to microgravity for individuals, countries, and institutions to conduct meaningful research. And if you've been paying attention to Axiom, you know that they're sort of switching up their emphasis, where they initially had been really targeting wealthy individuals, and now they're targeting representatives of countries, where this latest Axiom 3 mission was representatives of countries that flew, and not necessarily private individuals themselves who paid for themselves. And so it's an advertisement, right? That vice president of marketing at Axiom, that's her job. Her job is to market Axiom Space. And these are another way to market that these space companies exist, that these space opportunities exist. Same with Space Perspective, right? So Space Perspective CEO, she talked about this in terms of accessibility. I'm trying to find the exact quote here. Space Perspective is on a mission to bring space travel to more people than ever. We can't wait to welcome the winner. Blah, blah, blah. Experience, growing community of explorers who will all safely experience a life-changing journey and return to a new perspective of our planet and humanity. Through this program, we are amplifying our mission to bring accessible space tourism to the world. So that is also largely about marketing, isn't it? Marketing to a wider audience, to people who think that I am not of the right stuff, physical makeup of a traditional astronaut, therefore I can't go to space. Well, Space Perspective has been purposely marketing themselves as a means to travel to the near space, to the curvature of the Earth, for anybody. I don't know how many criteria they have in terms of who's allowed to fly with them, but it's not a high G launch. And it's not like you need to be perfect, perfect able-bodied person in order to fit into the gondola. There might be safety concerns. I don't know. I haven't really looked into it deeply yet, but actually I need to, because my next book is sort of about that. But it's one of those things where we're really trying to open up accessibility to all. And it's not a free ride, right? They're selling tickets. Axiom's selling tickets. Space Perspective is selling tickets. They're selling tickets. So all of this ties together. It is marketing. It is visibility. It is sales. It is spreading the message of space to people who don't think that space is accessible to them, or who don't think that you can do product research in space. All of it is just, it all ties together. I think it's beautiful. I really do. Somebody before this talk requested that I speak about the Coca-Cola and Pepsi research in space. We'll call it research. So you might not have heard of this because it was a while ago. This was 1985. Coca-Cola had asked NASA to do research on carbonated beverages in space. Could they build a dispenser to dispense Coke in space? If you think about the idea of a carbonated beverage, you've got the bubbles of carbon dioxide, right? Where everything's floating around in a means where the how do I say this? The fluid dynamics is different in gravity than in microgravity, right? And so the gas bubbles are going to be distributed differently in a can of Coke, which I don't actually have in front of me right now. I was just drinking one at lunch. Did I drink Coke or Pepsi at lunch? That's a good question. It was Dr. Pepper. But my point is, like, in a can on Earth, the gravity is pulling down the liquid. It's pulling down the gas. It is pulling these things down in a way that is not in microgravity. And so when you're thinking about drinking it in microgravity and not being able to get the gas up to burp or to have it separate in a means because there's no gravity to do so, it's a challenge, right? So first off, how do you dispense it? And second off, is it good for astronauts at all? And the answer is yes, you could dispense it. And no, it's not good for astronauts. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because once Pepsi found out that Coke was doing this experiment in space on the space shuttle, they wanted in. And so it became less about research. It became less about the special dispenser and how do you do the fluid dynamics. And it became more about advertisement. And so I would argue that it was both. It was both a research project and it was, just a great advertisement, because we're still talking about it all these years later. This was, almost 40 years ago, and we're still talking about this. It's never been repeated as far as I know. I don't think Coke or Pepsi ever flew anything again. Just because carbonated beverages do not work well in space. Maybe they'll figure that out. Maybe we just need artificial gravity. I don't know. But my point is, like, there's just multiple reasons why we do these projects. And I think that it's valuable for science, and I think it's valuable for spreading the word about space. And yes, I think it's valuable for getting sales, especially non-traditional sales, to a lot of these space companies. I said this is a short live stream and I've gone on for a while. I can really blab about space forever. So I'm going to wrap this up. If you want a greater list of some of these partnerships, I'm not going to mention them all. There's been way too many. I am going to have this in the newsletter that goes out Monday mornings on astrolytical.com/subscribe. The link is in the notes there, where you can subscribe and get a more detailed list of some of these more recent projects, because I did not even touch, like, there's been beer brewing in space, for example. Like, I didn't even touch like the surface of the different projects that have been going on even in recent times. And if you think about the fact that we're flying more commercial facilities, whether it's Crew Dragon or whether it is Axiom Station that will be going up soon, or any of the other commercial space stations and platforms, there's going to be greater availability and less restrictions. Okay, baby's getting fussy, so I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much, Ross, for the comment. Again, if you want the greater list, go to astrolytical.com/subscribe for the newsletter. And please subscribe to my channel. I don't usually have a baby, so you can actually hear it a little bit better. You all take care.